Fine, thank you. And you?
I'm good. Wow, it's really nice to have you here.
Thanks for the invitation. Really excited to be here as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, hi everyone. Hi students. Can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so welcome to this guest lecture. And we are so happy because I have a very good friend of mine. She is really happy and then willing to share some experience. And she is already here right now with us. So if you can turn the camera on, we really appreciate. And then at the end of the course, we will share for the presence. And also, I would like you to rename your name so I know that you are from IPTP, THT, or GFM. So please kindly rename your account names. Just a moment. Okay. So I think we can start right now. Good afternoon again, everyone. So welcome to this guest lecture course of the Animal Environmental Management, Animal Waste Management, and Biometeorology. I also see some lecturers already here. Thank you, Ibu and Bapak, already joining with us. And to begin, I would like to introduce our kindly speaker for today. We have Dagmar Bramhar. So she is a PhD candidate at Animal Production System Group, Wageningen University of the Netherlands. She had a master degree also from Wageningen University and also bachelor degree also from Wageningen University. So you really love Wageningen a lot, I think. Yeah, you do. Great. And she has some experience related with the thesis and internship. So she did her master thesis with the Cargill Animal Nutrition and Chair Group Adaptation Physiology, Wageningen University and Research, and has a specialization on adaptation, health, and welfare. And also another master thesis with the SNV KMDP Kenya and Chair Group of Animal Production System Group with the specialization on global and sustainable productions. And she had a work experience as you did a part-time work for Nutrico with the task of reviewing and improving FAO report based on FAO guidelines. And you had a lot of students activities, which is very nice. And some contents related with the computer skills and also the soft skill. And you also love a lot for traveling, tier export, wow, horse riding, and a course of Kiswahili. What is that? I'm not sure if I really know that, but it seems very interesting. Okay, Nar, without any further ado, you have about like 1 hour for your lecture, and we can also discuss about the things. But if you students, for example, you have questions in the meantime, you can write down your questions at the chat box, or otherwise we can have a discussion at the at the end of the presentation. So Dagmar, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for the invitation for today. It's always good to meet fellow animal scientists all around the world. So I'm really happy for that as well. Let me share my screen and kindly also let me know when you see it.
It's perfect.
Yes, so you can see it?
Yes, perfect, Dagmar.
Okay, thank you so much. So thanks for the kind introduction, Wendy. It's really good to see you again. Unfortunately online, but still happy to see you. Thanks again for the invitation today. I will give you a little bit of a lecture today about the environmental challenges of livestock production in Europe and in East Africa. And well, since I'm Dutch myself, of course, I will use the Netherlands as an example, and I will use Kenya as an example as well, since my PhD project is, well, done on this side, and that's also where I am at this moment. So I hope my connection will stay stable, but it is still Kenya, so sometimes there might be some interruptions. So if that is the case, I'm really sorry for that, but I try to come back as quickly as possible. Well, I was planning to introduce myself, but that's not needed anymore because Wendy already did that. So thanks for that. That will save us a little bit of time. But maybe it's just good for you to know that, well, I'm currently working on my PhD project, as said, within animal production systems of Wageningen University. And my project is about the role of livestock in circular food systems. And the concept of circular food systems is also something that I will explain a little bit later in this lecture. So now I will show you some pictures of my team of Africa when I was here doing my master's. And these were the research facilities of Cargill when I was doing my research in the Netherlands at their institute. Well, I will start my presentation with a little bit of an introduction about the growth of the human population and also the effect on resource use. Just to give a little bit of an idea what the differences are between different areas within the world. So let me start with that. Well, I think we all know, of course, the human population has grown really a lot. Sorry, I have to change some screens. In the last decade. So from this figure, you can see the increase in the population from around 1800. So around 1800, that was the first time we reached 1 billion of people in this planet. Well, at this moment, we're already at 7.67 billion people. So we have seen a huge increase. And of course, this also had a huge effect on the environment as well. Well, what we can see in this figure, let me get my laser pointer, is that most people are living in Asia. So also where you guys are from. And then also a huge proportion is coming from Africa. But Oceania has been quite constant. And also the other places, the other continents in the world has increased slightly, but are more constant as a whole. Well, as said, of course, with the increase of the population, you also see a huge difference in the use of resource use. So this can be a problem, but it doesn't necessarily has to be a problem. It's really the type of resources we're talking about. So as long as we keep on talking about biomass, in my opinion, it is not a problem that we start using more biomass, at least as we stick to the regenerative capacity of our planet and of the resources that we use. So if we're taking nutrients from the soil, make sure that you put the same amount of nutrients in the soil as well. At least these are resources that we can renew. But of course, we also have non-renewable resources. And for that, you can now think about the fossil energy sources, etc. So that's where the problem starts. Of course, we are using the planet, but we also have to make sure that our next generations can still use the planet and that we're not over-consuming all the resources that we have. And that is something what is currently done. So that is shown in this figure with the Earth Overshoot Day. So what we can see is that in 1970, for all the resources, etc., that we were using, we were not exceeding our regenerative capacity. So we were only using one planet, actually. But if we look at nowadays, we already are using all the resources by, well, mid-July. So during the rest of the year, we actually should have needed an extra planet to get all the resources that we're currently using. And I think you can understand that, well, throughout the planet, we are not using the same amount of resources. So we have a country overshoot day as well. So that we can see, okay, if we look at Qatar and Luxembourg, for example, well, mid-February, they are already reaching the point that they are exceeding their regenerative capacity of the planet, meaning that they would actually need 9 planets to live a sustainable life. Fortunately, you people in Indonesia are doing much better. You can reach actually up to the 3rd of December, and the Netherlands is doing much worse. Well, they have not been able to do all these calculations for all the countries worldwide. So Kenya is, for example, also not part of this figure. But yeah, it really should be an eye-opener that we're using way too many resources and that we have to start thinking about the future generations. We have to be able to live sustainably. And of course, with the increase of resources, one of the explanations of this increase is also by the consumption and sometimes overconsumption of animal source products. So in this figure, we can see, okay, how much kilograms of a certain product are consumed per person. So the light green bar shows the amount in 2005, 2007, and the dark green bar shows what we expect in 2050. Well, then you also can see on the x-axis that we have the examples of the developed world and the developing world. And then when we look at the meat and milk consumption, we can see that the developed world, so Europe as well, is over-consuming. We're using so much more than the developing world. So if we use proteins now as an example, well, for us as human beings, we need around 57 grams of protein per person per day. But at this moment in Europe, we're consuming 104 grams, which is almost twice as much as we need. So we are really over-consuming the amount of proteins. And of these proteins, 62 grams is coming from animal source products. Where in the developing world, they're only consuming 15 grams. So 4 times less compared to the developed world. So there is really a mismatch between the consumption, which is happening in the developed world and in the developing world. So in my opinion, the developed world has to reduce the consumption of animal source products, where in the developing world, we have to increase this consumption because, of course, it is partly protein, but we also have other micronutrients which are really important for nutrition, to meet our nutritional requirements. Well, you know that with the production of animal source products, we also, and with the consumption of it, we also have some issues. So, okay, if we're talking about overconsumption, of course, it is not healthy for us as well. We grow fat, we get heart diseases, we can get type 2 diabetes, for example. While undernutrition, for sure, you also know it is not good. It stagnates the growth and the development of the human population. So the health of our human beings is really important. But of course, the health of the environment is also very important to, again, be able to let the future generations also live a comfortable life. Well, one of the things when we talk about environment are, of course, the greenhouse gas emissions. That is something which is a very hot topic nowadays. Global warming is a big issue. The carbon dioxide emissions, methane emissions, and nitrous oxide emissions. But of course, we should also not forget about biodiversity loss. Deforestation also has directly an effect on biodiversity loss. Also think about land use change, but also water. We're using a lot of water to produce the products, the animal source products, but there is also a pollution of our water bodies and of our soils, etc. So all these things have to be kept in mind, and that is something we're going to talk about today. The environmental impacts when it comes to producing livestock, so producing animal source products, but also the other way around. So, okay, the greenhouse gas emissions, the global warming, what is now the effect on the animals itself? Well, for me, the key question that I would like to answer somewhere in my life, because of course you cannot get one answer, and in my opinion, every person has to create its own opinion on it and vision and follow that one. Same for countries, continents, etc. But for me, the key question is, how do we want to produce our food while still respecting the planet? So if we want to produce products via a footprint approach, there are two answers we could have, which is we want to produce with less impact, or we want to eat with less impact. Well, what does it mean if we want to produce with less impact? That would mean that we want to increase the productivity of our herd. So that often means that we want to feed our animals really good quality products, so nutrient-dense feeds. On the other side, if we want to eat with less impact, we could think about eating chicken instead of beef, because if we want to produce 1 kg of chicken, there is less pollution. We are not producing as much greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1 kg of beef. We're using less land, etc., etc. On the other hand, we could also say, okay, let's not eat any meat at all, because apparently it has a bad effect on the environment, so let's go vegan. But of course, every pro also has its cons. There are always some trade-offs that we can find. So if we would say, okay, we want a nutrient-dense feed, or we want to eat chicken instead of beef, now we come up with feed food competition. And what do I mean with feed food competition? Well, for example, if we look at the grains worldwide, all the production that we have worldwide, around 30% of these grains are not produced for us human beings, but are produced for our animals. Yeah. And in our opinion, that is not really logic, because of course, if you want to feed these products to the animals, they are using part of the energy and the protein to maintain themselves. It's the same as what we are doing when we eat these products, of course. So it is much more efficient if we consume these products immediately ourselves. So this is what we call feed food competition. On the other hand, I introduced you, okay, we can eat chicken instead of beef, and still we will have feed food competition. So how does that work? Well, if we look at the diet of a chicken nowadays, often what they are eating are grains. So let's say wheat or maize as a whole. So no byproducts necessarily, but the whole product. So again, these products could have been used for human consumption directly. Where if we look at cattle, they are ruminants, so they can eat many other types of products which are more fibrous. So think about grassland, for example. So the moment we feed grass to cows, that's not feed food competition. And that's also what I want to say here. If we go vegan and we're not eating any animal source products anymore, there are still products that are not utilized, and that is not efficient at all. So there are certain byproducts that we human beings can't eat. The same is with grass. We cannot utilize the grass, unfortunately. So also that is something we want to avoid. However, we can have marginal land or we can have arable land. So that example of grassland, if we have grasslands, well, we cannot use it for human consumption as said, but we can feed it to the cows. However, if we can make it arable land by land use change and now produce crops on it to feed human beings directly again, that's something we should do. At least that's also the concept of circular food systems, where I will come back to a little bit later. If that's not the case, if it is marginal land and we cannot produce any crops on it, then it makes sense now to feed the grass to animals, to the ruminants. So in that perspective, it does not make any sense to become a vegan because you will not be able to utilize the grass and you will not be able to utilize some byproducts or waste products from the food system. Well, of course, if we look at the production of animal products, so this is an example of 1 kg of beef, the efficiency of producing these products, it really differs worldwide. So the kg of dry matter of feed that we need to produce 1 kg of beef really differs across the world. So what we can see is that in Western Europe, we need less feed to produce 1 kg compared to Sub-Saharan Africa. So compared to, for example, Kenya. And this, of course, also affects the environment. Because if there is a low efficiency, we need relatively more feed to maintain the animal itself. And this often also means that we're using low quality feeds. So for a ruminant, for example, if they are using low quality feeds, it is often very fibrous, which means that the rumination and fermentation process in a rumen takes quite long. And during this process, a lot of methane emission is produced, and therefore also methane emissions increase. On the other hand, the same thing is with low efficiency, is that if we have low nitrogen use efficiencies, it leads to high emissions of nitrous oxide, ammonia, and nitrates, which of course, again, has negative impacts on the environment. However, what I sometimes find a little bit frustrated in the literature is that when people are talking about the greenhouse gas emissions as a whole, so the first picture over here shows the total amount of carbon dioxide produced per square kilometer per year. What we can see here is that in Europe, we have quite a lot of emissions in total when it comes to carbon dioxide, the equivalent. So that includes all the greenhouse gas emissions. But if we look at the emissions intensities, we can see that the emissions actually in Europe are quite low and in Africa are quite high, because we're producing less products and the production per kilogram of product, so in this case, the carbon dioxide per kilogram of protein is much higher in this case, it's the developing world compared to Europe. So in my opinion, it is better to look at the intensities of the greenhouse gas emissions compared to the total greenhouse gas emissions. But of course, with this, we also have to keep in mind that the European people are still over-consuming. So for this, I also feel like we have to balance it. So, okay, people in Europe and people in Africa have to start eating the same amount of protein. And in that case, maybe we as Europe, as Europe, we maybe have to export products to Africa in case they cannot produce it themselves, which is of course still not sustainable. Preferably we produce the products on the spot, in the region itself. Because at this moment we're still producing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, even though that we're very efficient in the production of the products, we're still producing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions when we look at the big scale, of course. Well, this was just to give you a little bit of an idea, okay, what effect does the growth of the human population has on resource use and on greenhouse gas emissions. Now I would like to use the Netherlands as an example of Europe, and after that Kenya as an example of Africa. So I'll give a short introduction about the agricultural sector. Well, if we look at the gross domestic product, it is quite small actually when it comes to agriculture. It's only 1.6. And when we look at all the production, the farms in the Netherlands, they are quite large scale and they are very intensive farms. So when we look at dairy farms, for example, the average at this moment is 108 cows per farm. And I think in the last 10 years, this actually increased with around 25 cows. So we really have seen an increase in the number of cows per farm in the Netherlands. Another thing that is really a characteristic of the Netherlands when it comes to livestock farming is that the farms are very specialized. So a dairy farm keeps dairy, a pig farm keeps pigs, etc. Of course, with crop farms, there's a little bit more diversity, but still there are just a few species that they are using and not a lot. Then where we're quite lucky with is that we have irrigation. So even though if we have a dry summer, for example, we will still be able to water our plants. Of course, we've always been in certain boundaries because we cannot overuse the water. And this is also regulated in the Netherlands. Then in the Netherlands, we have 4 seasons. So we have the spring, we have summer, autumn, and winter. And this also means that we only have one harvesting season. Of course, it differs per type of crop, but throughout the year, we can only harvest all the crops we can only harvest it once. Unless now we start using greenhouses, of course, then it is differently. But all the crops planted on the fields are only harvested once a year. Then something which really is where the Netherlands is well known for, I think, is their international trade. So of all the products that we trade internationally, 17% of those products are meat, eggs, and dairy. Then the total value of the international trade is around 105 billion per year, so that's quite a lot. But it is good to realize that all the products that we are exporting are not necessarily produced in the Netherlands. We also are re-exporting products from abroad. So for example, think about roses. A lot of roses are produced here in Kenya. They are exported to the Netherlands, and then now from the Netherlands, it is exported to the rest of Europe, for example. Well, when it comes to feed, okay, when we look at ruminants, we can feed the ruminants a lot of grass silage and maize silage. Those are the main ingredients, and mainly grass silage are the main ingredients for their feed. But of course, we also still have concentrates, and most of these concentrates are coming from Europe, 65%. And this is actually what we Dutch people call regional. In my opinion, if it is coming from Europe, it's not really regional. For me, regional is when it comes from the Netherlands itself, but that is not the case. And then when we look at innovations, we are really focusing on that. I think that's where we're also quite well known of worldwide. And where in the past, we really focused on the production and productivity of our products, of the milk production, meat production, crop growth, etc. We're nowadays are mainly focused on the production process itself. So we find it really important to look at animal welfare. We find it important to have a low impact on the environment. And these are now the innovations where we're focusing on. So that's a little bit of the introduction about the agricultural sector of the Netherlands. And now I will give you a few examples of problems that we face in the Netherlands, and how we're trying to tackle it, or regulations which we have to meet, both from the Netherlands but also from Europe. And the first one is an environmental challenge when it comes to manure. As said, we have very large farms. We're having a lot of animals per square meter as well. So we're really intensified, but that also means that we're producing a lot of manure. Now, if we want to use all this manure to fertilize our own land, there is a surplus of nitrogen and also of phosphate. And with an oversupply of these elements, well, it can lead to eutrophication. And I'm not sure if you know what eutrophication is. Yeah? You know? Okay, perfect.
No.
Then I don't have to. Sorry?
They know, they should know.
Perfect. Then I don't have to explain it again. That's great. But the results are these dead fish here. So yeah, one of the results can be eutrophication, also an example of pollution, and of course, greenhouse gas emissions. Think about nitrous oxide again, which is released to the air. So what we did in Europe is they put a nitrogen and phosphate ceiling. So they told the Netherlands and also the other countries in Europe, of course, that we cannot use more than 173 million kgs of phosphates, not more than 504 million kgs of nitrogen per year. Then they gave us another standard as well, that was that we cannot use more than 170 kgs of nitrogen per hectare. So that means, of course, that we have to be really efficient with feeding our animals to lower these elements as much as possible. Fortunately, they gave us a derogation, meaning that they said to dairy farmers, okay, if you have more than 80% of grasslands, then you're now allowed to supply your grasslands with 230, 250 kgs of nitrogen to increase the protein content of our grass. So that's the only exception, but we can only do that if we meet this ceiling. We cannot go above this ceiling, because then we will lose our derogation as well, and then many dairy farmers will have a problem as well. So how are we trying to tackle these problems? Well, as said, we try to be really specific with the type of feeds that we're giving the animals, the type of diets that we're giving the animals. So we have to minimize the phosphates and the protein content of the diet as much as possible, because it is not efficient, of course, as well, if you're oversupplying, for example, your protein content. There's more nitrogen coming out via urine, for example. So with that, it is important, if we feed our ruminants, for example, that, okay, we take the grass silage and the maize silage as the base, and now we're going to balance it with the concentrate that we're going to supply them with as well, to make sure that we meet the nutritional requirements of the cow, but we're not feeding too much. On the other side, we also we had to reduce the dairy herd. In 2018, if I'm not wrong, in 2018, we even got phosphate rights. So they gave the farmers a certain amount of phosphate rights, and based on those phosphate rights, we now had to produce, or now had to make changes in our herd, which meant that some farmers might have extended just a few years before, and they had to remove their animals again. And therefore, they had to close their farm because they were not profitable anymore. And that is also something which I would like to show you in this figure, and I'm very sorry that it is in Dutch. But what we can see with the green bars here is the number of farms that we had from 2000 to 2020. Then now the blue line are the number of animals, and the orange line are the average number of animals per farm. So you can see that in the last 22 years, there was quite a decrease in number of farms that we had. But on the same time, we also saw an increase in the average of number of animals that we had. And we see a decrease in the total number of animals that we have. And this is also all, or at least not all, but at least also partly related to the phosphate rights and all the challenges that they always face in the livestock sector. Another problem that we have is biodiversity loss. Again, as said, we are a very small country. We have very intensified agriculture, which also means that we tend to do some drainages of wet areas. We use a lot of chemical fertilizer. We do some overfishing, since half of the Netherlands is also bordering the sea, the ocean, and also invasive alien species are coming in, which sometimes outcompete the original species that we have. And of course, this leads to habitat loss, also fragmentation, even due to highways, for example, running from one city to the other, and degradation of our land as well. Well, what we tried, we tried to improve the biodiversity as well in the last decades. And one thing, for example, that we introduced is eco-ducks. And that is a picture over here. I don't know, is that also something you see in Indonesia?
No.
Do you have eco-ducks? No? Okay, then it is a good example. So what we try to do here is make a linkage between two areas. So maybe this is a forest here where we have some deers, but due to the highway, they were not able to cross, or if they would cross, they would die. So now with this interlinkage between the two areas, they will be able to at least immigrate towards the other areas. And this way, reducing a little bit of the habitat loss. On the other side, we also do a lot with subsidies. We always like to stimulate farmers and other people with doing the good thing and giving money for it. So one thing they give subsidies for is to fill borders with flowers. So for example, if we are producing here some maize grains or weeds or whatever type of crop, we now say, okay, put a nice flower border around it. It is good for the eye, even the tourists like it. But on the same time, it also gives a good place for birds to lay their eggs, to hatch, etc. And also for insects to grow. So this way we try to increase the biodiversity losses that we have, to reduce the biodiversity losses, sorry. Then another thing we have, as explained before, how we have to meet the regulations of the Netherlands, but we also have to meet the regulations of Europe. So Europe introduced Natura 2000. And with Natura 2000, we're really focusing on the birds and certain types of habitats, which are almost extinct, or at least that are threatened. So what they said, okay, we select certain areas within all the European countries, and those we have to bring back to nature. Yeah, so no matter what there was, okay, cities, they cannot get rid of cities, but if there are farms have to be bought out and we return it to nature. So of course, this has been very challenging for farmers in the Netherlands as well. Some farmers had to change their profession, other ones had to move with a lot of expenses as well. But at least this way, we're trying to create some natural nature back that we had in the past to make sure that the threatened species can still exist, or at least that that we are not losing more species in the Netherlands than we already had. Then I think you might have seen this picture before already. So I'm not going to say too much about it. But of course, we have a lot of greenhouse gas emissions when it comes to livestock productions. And it is not only about the greenhouse gas emissions on farm, but it is about the whole food supply chain. But if we look at all the greenhouse gas emissions, most of the production of the greenhouse gas emissions is due to the enteric methane emission. So the emissions that are produced by the ruminants. Well, if we want to tackle something, it would be good to tackle the emissions from the ruminants in this case. And as said, in the Netherlands, we're very innovative, or at least we tend to be, we try to be. And what we said is, okay, we start a climate act with the idea that from taking 1990 as baseline, we want to reduce our greenhouse emissions with 49% by 2030 and 95% by 2050. And I find that very ambitious. I'm really excited as well to see the results. But of course, better to be over ambitious than not being ambitious at all. And of course, we can not only do this with the agricultural sector, even though the farmers always feel like we're the only one who are getting hurt with all these new rules, but they also try to tackle it via electricity. So think about solar energy, wind energy, water energy, etc. Via the industry, built environment, traffic and transport. So use more public means or use the bicycle, which we already do quite a lot in the Netherlands, fortunately. And as said as well, of course, via agriculture. Via agriculture, they want to really look also into the whole food supply chain. So we have to consume in a climate-friendly way. which also means that we have to reduce our food waste. Because if we look at all the food waste throughout the food supply chain, we are losing around 30% of our food, which is a lot. And this differs very much as well between different countries. So if we look at Europe, for example, most of the food waste is at the end of the food supply chain. So at the household waste, we're throwing away a lot of food, where in the developing world, like for example, Kenya, most of the food waste is now coming from the production sites or harvesting sites. That is where we are losing a lot. But at least this is something that we really have to change. Then, as said, methane emission is one of the things that should have its focus, because if we can reduce that, that would be great. However, in the policies of the Netherlands, they try to tackle the emissions for the manure. Well, the methane emissions from manure is not even that much. It's just a few percent. So one of the companies in the Netherlands, called DSM, has been working on the reduction of methane emissions for the last decades. So DSM came up with a new product called Bovaer, and they actually just got their licenses from Europe as well to now start selling it in Europe. Because for the last 10 years, they have done a lot of research, I think around 40 studies in different types of countries. And they checked, okay, with this product, if we only feed 1/4 of a tablespoon, we want to reduce the methane emission. And they accomplished that. With only 1/4 of a tablespoon, they were able to reduce 30% of the methane emissions produced for the animals. And the concept behind this is that, okay, during the fermentation process in the rumen, we produce carbon dioxide and we produce hydrogen. And there is an enzyme in the rumen that combines these two now to methane emission. And via burping and farting, it is emitted to the environment. But now if we add this type of product to the feed, the production of these enzymes are reduced. And via the reduction, of course, the combination of the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen is also reduced. Reducing the methane emission, in my opinion, really big time. So I think this is a great innovation, and hopefully many farmers start adopting it. And of course, due to all the experiments that they did, they also found out that it has no effects on animal welfare or animal health. So that is really great. So these are things that has been going on for the last years in the Netherlands. But what is now the vision of our government at this moment? So the vision of the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality that they brought up is, okay, we know there is climate change and there is resource scarcity, so we have to reassess the production methods that we currently have. And in their opinion, circular agriculture can be seen as a logical and conclusive answer to these issues. And I want to make it a bit broader, because in my opinion, it is not only about agriculture, it is about the whole food system. The whole food system has to be circular. And I will talk about that a little bit, but I would first like to show you a short video, because, okay, the way we're currently producing, well, the world is still growing. Should this be the type of system that we have, or should there be a difference? Should there be a change? And now let me see if this works, because it doesn't seem like it. Otherwise, we're going to do it without.
No, we don't really see that much.
Not at all, huh? Oh.
Yes, I think it works.
Let's see. In Kenya, I learned to be very relaxed and give it some time, huh? No rush, no rush. But well, doesn't really seem like it's working. So we just continue.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Now it works. Or not. The idea is always good, huh?
We don't really hear the voice, Dahmar.
No?
No, maybe you should connect. You see the 3 dots? Yeah.
Nah, then we skip it. Not a problem because, yeah. Okay. Well, the idea was that we have to change our food system. There is overconsumption of food, as already said, in the developed world, underconsumption in the developing world. There's a lot of food waste, which has to be used if it is there. We would try to reduce the food waste, of course, and we have to take the environment into account. So as we said before already, how we can change our way of consuming, but we can also change the way of us producing the food. Well, as my introduction at the start, I'm doing my PhD about circular food systems. And this is a very hot topic in the Netherlands. And we're trying to do this type of research now in different types of countries around the world. So, of course, a lot of PhD students are doing their research in the Netherlands, but we also have someone in the UK, we have someone in New Zealand. Well, all around the world, it is happening at this moment. And when it comes to circular food systems, we came up with 5 concepts, with 5 principles. And the first one is that we want to safeguard the health of our agroecosystems. And this means, again, that we have to stay within the regenerative capacity of our planet. So that means we don't want to have any deforestation. We want to have conservation of the nature that we have. And everything has to be regenerative. So instead of monocultures, think about polycultures and think about combining now the animals with the crop production, because there can be good synergies between those two. Then as the second principle, we want to avoid non-essential products and losses of waste of essential ones. So if this is possible to change, we also have to change consumer behavior in the type of food that they are eating. Because, of course, when we look at these snacks, we don't need it, They are not very nutritive. It's just that we really like the taste, and that's why we're eating these snacks. That's why we're drinking sodas, etc. So from a circular perspective of circular food systems, the idea is that we want to avoid, or at least minimize, eating these type of products because it would be more efficient to use the nutrients properly to feed other people around the planet. On the other side, we want to avoid the losses of waste and essential ones. So we already talked about about household waste, and we want to reduce these type of waste as much as possible, and also during other steps of the food supply chain. But if we have them, we have to make use of them, and I will come back to that in the 4th principle. Then we want to use the biomass effectively. So that is where we talked about, we don't want feed food competition, preferably. If we have byproducts or waste products that we can't use, then it's okay. But otherwise, we're using the products first to feed the human beings, because we already have enough people on the planet and we have to feed them all. And in the coming decades, the population is going to grow even further, and we still have to do it with one planet. Then the 4th one is to recycle inevitable and unavoidable biomass streams. So as said, okay, during the production process of our food supply chain, we have some byproducts, we have some waste products, and we would like to use it. So that looks like this. So if we have arable land and, well, we produce, for example, maize, then we want to use the grains for the human consumption first. And of course, it might be that we're not using these grains immediately, but that there might be some processing on the way. But now if we are producing maize, it's not only the grains that we also have the cobs, and we also have the maize stovers, which is now the residue or the byproduct, or anyhow how you want to call it. And these products should be used as well, of course. Otherwise, it's just going for waste, and we can actually use it. So in that moment, that's where the animals come in. So ruminants can eat the stovers and the cob, for example, of the maize and utilize it. The same is during production and the processing process of the products. There might be some co-products and byproducts that arise, and we don't want to throw them out, right? We can use these products now as a feed source for animals. So think about the maize germ, the maize bran. That's right, that we're actually already using in our feed sector. Then from the consumption side, the household waste is also something that we can use. We can use it to make compost and bring it back to the land, but sometimes we also have meat as leftovers, for example. Well, with some good heat treatment, we can now use it to feed our pigs. So that's the role now of livestock in a circular food system. We're using the byproducts and waste products and grassland, as we already discussed before, as long as it is marginal land. We only use these type of products to feed our animals, and we're not using our very high nutrition products. Those we use for humans directly. And lastly, we want to minimize the use of energy, but if we're using energy, then we're going to use renewable energy. So again, think about solar energy, wind energy, water energy, etc. But we try to minimize it as much as possible. So this is also the type of project that I'm doing in Kenya. And in Kenya, I really focus, because it is about livestock, I focus mainly on livestock farming systems, and then trace back inputs from the farm, and also look at the outputs of the farm. So where are products coming from? Because in my opinion, when it comes to circular food systems, we also want to take products as locally as possible and not import products from Europe to Kenya and the other way around. Try to produce it in your own country or in surrounding countries, preferably. And then now we go to Kenya, and also a short introduction about Kenya and their agricultural sector. So agriculture is much bigger in Kenya. It serves for around 26% of the gross domestic product. And still most of the products are produced by small-scale farmers. And this is actually 70% of all the agricultural products are produced by these farmers. And these farmers are often mixed farmers. So they have both livestock and they have crops. And when I talk about small scale, we talk about, well, let's say having 3 cows, 10 chicken, and 2 pigs, for example. Very small scale. The problem with these farmers is that they really depend on rain. So most of the farms are rain-fed. Often it's the large-scale farms or the greenhouses that have irrigation, but the small-scale farms, they do not. So they are really affected with the climate changes. Then we have 2 rainy seasons, or at least that's how it should be, because we already see quite some changes in the presence of the rainfall. But in the past, we had the rainy season from March till May, and that was then the heavy rains, the long rains, and then the short rains from October to December. But for now, we're already mid-April, and the rains, I think they started yesterday. No, but at least they have started maybe 1 week ago, but it's already delayed. So it's really difficult for farmers to know, okay, when should I start planting my seeds, when to harvest, etc., etc. Then if we look at Kenya, it is quite a big country, but 80% of the country is arid and semi-arid, so it is very, very dry. And fortunately, only 36% of the population is living there, but there is still a lot of livestock living on that site as well. Well, if we look at the production of feed for livestock, they highly depend on imports, and that is mainly the case for concentrates. There are almost no concentrates produced in Kenya. Most of it is coming from surrounding countries, but also from Europe, so now and then, or South America. And this leads to very low profit margins. The farmers already are struggling quite a lot. The ones that want to increase their productivity depend on the concentrates, buying these concentrates. And it is just insane what the prices are there. And it is impossible to make a profit at this moment. But I think it is something we see worldwide. And mainly during the dry season, which we are ending now, the prices are really high. And farmers decide to reduce the productivity. It's what we see at this moment. For example, we really have a shortage in milk, and it is just because of the dry season. Farmers don't have a stock, there is no forage available anymore, etc. Then some challenges that we see here, as said, climate change is really, really affecting Kenya. So in the northern part, we have the severe drought, and it is the same in the southern parts of Ethiopia, of course, since they border each other there. Because for the last 3 consecutive rainy seasons, there has been so little rain, so there's a lot of crop failure. If there are no crops, of course, the animals can't eat anything, which you can see on this picture. A lot of the animals are dying because in these dry regions, it's mainly goats, camels, and beef cattle, which are there. But of course, next to livestock, the same effect has it on the wildlife. There are a lot of national parks in the northern part of Kenya as well. And the same thing with the giraffes, the gazelles, etc. They are also dying, unfortunately. A consequence of the drought in the northern parts of Kenya is that farmers start to move. So tribes start to move, and this is quite tricky in Kenya because many tribes can't get along very well. So a lot of conflicts arise. Tribes start murdering each other, stealing their cattle, etc., etc. So yeah, it can really lead to a lot of conflicts as well. This is, of course, very difficult to solve because we cannot change climate change in one day. So the only two things that we can do in this case is, okay, apart from moving and searching for better land, but of course, in the end, you preferably don't leave your own home as well. The only two things that we can do is irrigation, which is quite difficult in these areas and also quite expensive. And of course, breeding for better drought tolerant crops. And that is something they're working on as well. Then from having these severe droughts, we also have floods. The extremes are really kicking in. So rivers with heavy rains, rivers are overflowing, and it also destroys a lot of crops, a lot of stocks of the people as well. And with the movement of water, we are also moving a lot of sediments and nutrients. So land, but previously might have been very rich in nutrients, is now lacking any nutrients. So that is also really sad for the people living there. So also here, of course, no crops, no feed for the animals. So also in this case, animals are dying. Then I think something that we see a lot in Africa and also in other parts of the world, of course, also in South America a lot, is deforestation. And reasons for deforestation is, first of all, agriculture, because of course we want to have land to produce our crops, etc. Mainly when we have lands which are not fertile anymore, we tend to search for new land in Kenya instead of trying to improve the land that we already have. So we start cutting trees. Next to that, mainly in the rural areas, a lot of households are still using charcoal, so wood to cook on or to heat. Also still removing a lot of forests. And then Kenya is still very good in bribing. So when we look at the patronage politics, mainly the politicians who are in power and they want to remain in power, they really like to bribe or to create goodwill among the people, giving away land. So now they give away a piece of forest, for example. That is something we have seen big time in the past. Even the farm where I'm working at this moment is created this way, and it is about thousands of acres that they are giving away just to make sure that a certain community is voting for them so they can stay in power. Well, of course, with deforestation, we're losing a lot of biodiversity. It also affects rainfall. Trees just attract rain. So that also, again, affects the production of our crops. There is soil erosion and also greenhouse gas emissions. The carbon dioxide that was stored in our trees is now released to the land. The same with land use change. All the carbon stock will lead to greenhouse gas emissions. So thank God there are initiatives from the government, but also often from NGOs to replant forests. And of course, it is also good to make the community aware of the effects if we are having a lot of deforestation. So that's why we often see community projects over here. So the community is having these tree nurseries, producing these trees, which can now be planted back to the forest, and they are earning money with that, of course. And other things that they are doing, for example, is beekeeping in the forest to produce their honey and create a good income on that this way, creating new types of farmers, so to say. Then just in the Netherlands are also problems with manure, but here the problems are more on manure management, because there's really poor manure management. And when I talk about manure management, it is not only about the application, but it is also about the way they collect it, the way they treat it, and the way they store it. But when it comes to application, they are not optimally using the nutrients. So one of the things that we often see here is that when it comes to soil nitrogen, the availability is singled out as major constraint to crop production in many areas of Kenya and also of Saharan Africa. Because of the low fertilizer application rates, we have higher uptake of the nitrogen by crops than the input we have of the fertilizer. So this actually leads to mining of the nutrients, and this contributes to the soil depletion, of course. So one of the things that we often see, for example, is, okay, during rainy season, we don't want to bring the manure to the land because now it is way too heavy. So they want to wait till the dry season, till the manure is really dry, and now it is easier, less laborious to fertilize the land. But of course, it is actually during the rainy season that we actually need the manure to let the crops grow, for example. Then also the way they are hipping or piling the manure over here is very common. So they just pile everything up. It is staying there for a couple of months. Rain is coming over. There is no good surface where it is put on. So all the nitrates and phosphorus can just leach into the groundwater and again lead to eutrophication. Then, of course, they are not splitting the manure from the urine. So there is creation of ammonia, and also the pit is not covered with anything. So also nitrous oxide and methane emissions arise. And I think the main problem in Kenya is that there is no manure management policy whatsoever. We really try to teach the farmers how to properly manage the manure, but it is often that farmers have to learn from each other or via extension services. But of course, it is going very slowly. And you have to show the farmers what it can do. They have to see the results before them wanting to implement it actually. So this is what we also see worldwide. There is a lot of soil degradation, and there is more soil degradation in Africa compared to at least Western Europe over here. So yeah, that will really affect the productivity of the crops for a future. So it is really important to also focus on the regenerative capacity. So regenerate the land that we are already using, and don't treat it as a waste product now and creating new lands and new problems, so to say. So this is what we are seeing in Kenya for the last years, but of course also Kenya has a vision for 2030 in this case, and that is quite a long one, wanting to do so much. So they want to achieve an innovative, commercially oriented, modern agricultural sector through institutional reforms, increased productivity, land use transformation, increased access to markets, and development of arid and semi-arid lands, which is great. And I hope they, again, can achieve it before 2030. Again, very ambitious. I think all countries like to be very ambitious, which is good. And the focus Kenya has is, for example, on research and development. And what they are trying to do is really making the linkage between research and the farmers shorter. And with the research, they want to try to focus on irrigation, because that's really important for the arid and semi-arid areas. Also focus on products that are suitable for these areas, and look into biotechnology. Then they want to focus on extension services. As said, that is also something they're already doing quite a bit. So they want to look into the government, the NGOs, and also the private sectors, and really try to, have knowledge transfer between these these people, but also now towards the farmer, which is of course very important. It has to end up there in the end. Then they want to improve the seed and the breeds of both crops and animals. And also here they want to focus on the indigenous crops that they already have, because they are in the end quite suitable to the temperatures that they have here. But of course they want to improve the productivity. What we have seen in the past, for example, with the Holstein Friesians, if I go to farms around here, even the small-scale farms, around 70-80% of the farms are keeping Holstein Friesians. But these animals, they are not bred for the temperatures around here. So it is better to have some crossbreeding between the indigenous animals to keep the strength, the resistance against diseases, and increase the productivity via, well, maybe types of breeds coming from abroad. And that is something with the research institutes in Kenya already doing quite well. And the same with the crops. They want to have good productions, but also being resistant against the heat and also diseases, etc. Then they want to undertake livestock initiatives, and not only thinking now about breeds, but also offering services. So there should be good veterinary drugs available. There should be, for example, artificial insemination should be possible, but also making sure that the animals actually have feed throughout the year. So how can we store or feed properly, making, for example, maize silage or grass silage, teaching farmers these practices so they can also overcome the dry seasons and produce good qualities of feed. And lastly, it's about the irrigation. Again, they want to irrigate more areas so that there are less crop losses, etc. Well, that was actually my presentation for you. So I hope I gave you a little bit of an idea of, okay, if we talk about the growth of the population, we have a huge pressure on our resources that we have. We're exceeding our regenerative capacity already, so it's time to make changes. And of course, for every country, changes have to be made, but the way they make the changes, it's now up to their country. The main purpose in the end is to feed your population. So changes have to be made for sure. And from Wageningen University Animal and the Livestock Production Systems group I'm with, we now look into circular food systems and how that can fit in our future way of producing our feeds. Thank you so much for your attention. And I think, Wendy, I will hand the attention over to you now.
Well, thank you very much, Dagmar. It's really nice presentation and overview of some environmental challenges, especially in the Netherlands and also in Kenya. Now we have like about 20 minutes for discussions, and I have already some questions here, and it's coming from Austin. Austin, would you like to ask directly? Austin is my student from Animal Production System. Austin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, you can ask directly if you want.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll ask directly. Okay. Hello, my name is Austin. I'd like to ask, with our rate of population growth right now, I mean, our species as humans, do these methods that we already discussed about really have that much impact to save our world? I mean, in my opinion, sorry if this is kind of notorious and not so innovative, but somehow our population needs to fall to a certain point where resource demand is safe for our planet. Thank you.
And if you talk about methods that we have discussed, about what type of methods are you talking now? Is it about methods you discussed in previous lectures?
I don't know. I mean, lots of methods. Some are methods that you already pointed out in this presentation. Sorry for my bad English.
No.
It's okay. Is that the methods that we are discuss about circularity, or is it about, for example, method to do some assessment on greenhouse gas emissions? Like what methods, Austin, you refer to?
I think in general, I mean, does it really have that much impact? I mean, to save our world with this much population?
Yeah.
I think in general, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe like, because Dagmar, you already, in the Netherlands, especially, that you already did a lot of things, especially about circularity, that you do a lot of research, and also like the way people think, okay, we have to move from eating the animal product to vegan, or that's kind of approach or scenarios maybe that Austin reverting to, and he was like wondering whether this is effective enough, or do you think it's not, or if not, then what should maybe another methods could be help, for example. Maybe that's what I understand.
Good question. And I think, well, to be honest, of course, the problems that we have created it for many decades. So it is really difficult to solve everything in just a few years. So in my opinion, it is also really difficult to see if it is really creating a huge impact already at this moment. Like for restoring soil, I think you can see an effect a little bit quicker than when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, for example, the climate change. But in the end, my opinion is we have to start somewhere, and let's at least try. And of course, as the Netherlands, we're very small, very innovative maybe, but since we are very small, we cannot create a huge impact on our own. So with all the innovations that we have, it has to spread the world, and we have to implement that at as many places as possible. But for example, when it comes to circular food systems, I always feel like there are trade-offs, of course, because in theory, okay, maybe it is better if we get rid of all the animals when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. But now, is greenhouse gas emissions the main problem, or is the main problem feeding the world? So if the main problem is feeding the world, then we have to make use of all the resources that we have, and then the animals should be part of a system. But that is like a discussion you can have, and everyone has its own opinion on it, of course. So I can't give the answer on it, but at least I feel like it is good that we're paying attention to it and that we're making progress. And yes, it's going step by step, but hopefully we can have many generations after us and that we're not ruining the world at this moment. I hope that answers your question at least a bit.
Great. Yeah, I agree with you. And especially it's not only the Netherlands that have to be like, do a lot of things, but other countries also actually have to do the same things like in the Netherlands. Yeah, great. Thank you, Austin. Dahmar, anyway, can you also, can you stop your screen first so we can see? Okay, perfect. And we have the second questions. It's from Hendy. Hendy, are you there? Hendy is a colleague of mine. He graduated from Wageningen University as well. I think 4 years ago. Hendy, are you there? It's nice to see you here.
Yep. Can you hear my voice?
Yes. If you can turn the camera on, that would be great.
Hello.
Okay, great. Yeah. We can see you now. Perfect.
Okay. I think I need Dahmar to open the presentation on the part of the GHG in the beginning of your presentation. The GHG total and the GHG intensity, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the map in the beginning.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting.
This one?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, no. Let me do this quickly.
Yeah.
So that was a long presentation, huh? No, very good.
Okay, because my question is about, I'm a little bit confused when you're explaining at this part that the total GHG emissions, your country is a little bit producing more, but when you try to relate it to the GHG emission intensity, and the result is different, like your country is greener than before, it's related to the efficiency of the product, right? And and it's like because I'm taking a point of view about the production systems. What is the solution? Because when we try to intensify, then your further explanation that you explained about the eutrophication and like deposition of minerals of nitrogen and everything that happens in Netherlands nowadays. And also, I remember once discussion with Imke de Boer at that time. She she suggested me that Indonesia needs to make their own production system or to find their own production system because intensive farming is not the answer of all the things. That's why I'm just like, it's like a contradictive explanation from you.
Yeah, and I think again, as I also tried to explain to one of your students, in my opinion, every country has to find its own solutions. The Netherlands is now heading towards becoming less intensive, but also there, like for the Netherlands, we really depend as well on the export of products. We're producing way too much for the Netherlands as alone, so we have to export a lot. Well, when we go back to more extensive systems, we might create other problems. So indeed, the Netherlands being very intensive over supplying manure creates a lot of problems as well. It leads to a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, of pollution of the environment. Well, this is maybe less the case in countries where they are less intensified, but it causes other problems again. Like now we have a shortage of products to feed the population over there. So again, there is not one answer, in my opinion. Everything has trade-offs, and it is now I cannot tell the world to do something. My opinion can be, okay, maybe we want to use the less quality products. We want to be more circular, so we're going to use bioproducts, waste products, less nutritive products to feed our animals. That would be maybe okay for the Netherlands, to feed the Netherlands, but it might not be good enough to feed Africa, where there are still a lot of people not meeting the nutritional requirements and are underfed. So maybe there they have to intensify, where in the Netherlands we are more in a luxurious position, but still keeping all the other elements in mind, like economics, for example. Everything has effects on each other. So yeah, indeed, changing one thing might have a negative effect on the other thing. And yeah, is that an answer to your question or no?
Yeah, because that's why I need to take a look at the Australia, because at the time I also argue to all the peoples, why doesn't Indonesia follows like Australia does in the Northern Territory, like they use extensive farming. I also took the organic livestock or something in Wageningen as well, and it gives me quite another point of view, because they're seeing something different. Like if we are always talking about productions, they are talking about biodiversity. That's why they produce kind of permaculture method or something. I think it's quite popular around 2017, 2018. At the times in Netherlands, I visit some permaculture farms in the Netherlands, and also, yeah, it's just a discussion. And about the second question is about the I heard quite sometimes about the food circular system, but I'm a little bit confused. Is about only one country should fulfill it needs, or it takes into also account that, okay, it's okay if you also import some or several materials for your people from surrounding countries, or what? So what is the policy of the circular food system? Because nowadays Indonesia is quite, especially the broiler farms, right? Because we have to import quite some amount of broiler chickens from Brazil. And for me, that's strange, but that happens. This is from like the, I don't know, it's like United Nations rules or something that you have to import or something. I don't know, but yeah, but we have to import because we already can produce the broiler chicken by our own, but we have to import. So it's like we have to kill our people because we have to kill our people or our farmers to save other countries' farmers. So I want to know the scope of this food circular system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wendy, you wanted to say something?
No. You can continue first.
Okay, good. Very good question. And that's something actually we're looking into. because as said, we might want to produce as regional as possible, but it might not be possible because of the consumer behavior that we have. Like for example, in the Netherlands, maybe we really enjoy bananas, but we can't eat bananas in the Netherlands, so they have to come from the tropics. So yeah, or we have to really change our mindset and really change our whole diet. In that case, we can do it for quite regional, but otherwise we have to see, okay, where are the products coming from? But then if they are coming from abroad, then also bring it from countries where they can produce it better, if you know what I mean. Like, okay, maybe we want to produce very tropical products, but then now we have to produce it in greenhouses using a lot of energy, for example. And of course, we have to do the calculations. What is better now to import it from, I don't know how many thousand kilometers away, or producing it in our greenhouses. But yeah, these are things we're actually looking into with the chair group. There is a lot of modeling going on. So they put boundaries at certain regions or certain countries or certain continents. And they see, okay, if we have these type of products that we can produce, that means that we have these type of byproducts, for example. Well, now we can dedicate this type of byproduct to the cows, this type of byproducts to the pigs, etc. Now, based on these type of products that we have, how much protein source, animal protein source foods can we produce based on the resources that we have available in this land? But that is just in theory, because that would mean that we will have to change our whole diet and our whole way of thinking. Yeah. So it is a discussion that is going on, like at which scale are we looking when we're talking about circular food systems?
Yeah. Well, if I might to add, like for the first question, I agree that each country has to design their own systems and also their own priority. For example, Dahmar, in Indonesia, our study showed that our emission intensity is not that bad. Like we have about 1.50 CO2 equivalent per kilogram of milk that we produce, and it's still quite okay compared to the on the average of Asia. So in terms of greenhouse gas things, maybe we don't really that bad, but we do have big problems with the eutrophications and acidifications, because we actually lost a lot of nutrients. We had a lot of nutrient surplus because we use a lot of nutrients coming from import, and we don't really manage our manure quite well. So we have that problem, and I think that I agree that it's depend on, of course, you cannot really solve all the problems at the same time, and then depend on the target of like priority of the country. I think that we have to be also focused on that one. And anyway, I also have a question for you related with the principle of the circularity that you already said. We have 5 principles for circularity, and I was like wondering, when you want to, for example, designing a circularity for a country, are you going to do for those 5 approach simultaneously, or you have kind of priority in which principle you want to go beyond, or you want to step in first for the circularity? So I was a bit thinking about that when Handy about asking about circularity.
Yeah, true. Well, for my own study, I'm really focusing on on feeding the animals, because okay, for now I started with the livestock production systems, and I want to zoom out to the rest of the food supply chain, for example. But for now, I'm focusing on the feed inputs, like how much of the feed is produced on farm and what is coming into the farm and what type of products are this. So for now, I'm really focusing on the feed food competition. So I think you cannot tackle everything at once, indeed. No. So yeah.
And it's again also back to the priority of the country, in which a principle that you want to go beyond first and then take the priority on that one. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, for sure. I don't hear you anymore, Wendy.
Sorry. Yeah, I think we have one more question from Ifrad. Ifrad, are you there? It's
yes.
Yes, he's a student from the what is that in English? Geophysica and meteorology things. So ask you about
Meteorology.
physiology things related or what. So please go ahead, Ifrat.
Okay. My name is Ifrat, and I like to ask about ammonia pollution in Netherlands. I already read news in a website that the Dutch politicians are considering plans to force hundreds of farmers to sell up and cut livestock number and to reduce the major ammonia pollutions. And and when what I see in the PPT says that the most emission is ammonia. Correct me if I wrong. And the question is, how do people reduce the ammonia pollution? Not just a farmer, but all of people living in Netherlands. Maybe they reduce speed limits in motorways, or they reduce emission in industries or something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, actually, we have a new regulation since 2 years, I think, 3 years. COVID really fucks up my timeline, to be honest. And one of the new regulations that we have is indeed that we had to reduce the speed limit at the highway. So during daytime, we're only allowed to drive 100 kilometers per hour, and then during the nights, 130 as possible. Yeah, so there are some, but is it really about ammonia pollution? Because with Winnie, maybe you have to help me with this one as well. Maybe you know.
Yeah, because at the beginning that we are discussing about the ammonia emissions, but maybe the question is how, because we are discussing about livestock, and of course this is related with the ammonia, but how about people? People also produce an ammonia pollutions, right? Like not only the farmers, but also people in general. They also yeah, producing ammonia pollution. Is there maybe how to reduce the pollutions from ammonia from people? I think that's the questions.
Okay, yeah. So no, then indeed they are not only focusing on livestock.
Yeah.
I think at a given moment I noted down the different areas where they try to reduce the emissions. So transport is one of them, which is done indeed by reducing the speed limits, but also try to promote more use of public means or try to be healthy and use your bicycle as said, but also with building, etc. And
also probably like recycling the extractor. Is that also happen in Netherlands, or because it's a lot of ammonia emissions also from people, from human there? Is that also happen in Netherlands, Dahmar, or not?
Yeah, for sure. Like they're making compost out of that as well. It's also used as a fertilizer, but I'm not really an expert on that, I have to admit.
Yeah. But I think the point is there are also a lot of actions that are already taken into account to reduce ammonia pollutions, not only from the livestock but also from the people. I think. Yeah. Well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Is there any more questions from students? Because we are actually on Ramadan, Dahmar. Now we are fasting, and in the moment that we are going to break our fast in 20 minutes, more or less. And but we always difficult to find a time for students and for you, so it should be done in the afternoon. And I think some students, they are now listening, but some students, they are preparing for the break for breaking their fast. So it's really it's busy here, but we are really excited with Ramadan. And if there's no more questions, I would like to thank you, Dahmar. Thank you for being here with us. And as our appreciation, I would like to share a certificate, and I would like to ask our Vice Dean of Academic, Faculty of Animal Science, Ibu Professor Irma. Are you there, Ibu Professor Irma? Ibu, you are still mute, I think.
Okay, I am here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank
Ibu.
you, Lindy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dagmar, on behalf of the Faculty of Animal Science, IBB University, we would like to thank for your lecture today. Very interesting and nice presentation. Also attractive discussion. And thank you very much again. Thank you. Please,
Thank you so much for
here is
having me.
a certificate of our appreciation for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ibu.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ibu. And also, we have a little bit of souvenir for you that I'm going to bring it to the Netherlands next week. Yeah, I will be in the Netherlands next week, Dahmar. So I hope to see you then in Netherlands. Oh, I hope. Or
No, I won't be there, huh?
Otherwise I will put it on your desk or put it to Leah. Then
That
you
is
can.
great. Very sweet.
Oh yeah. Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate for your lecture today, and I'm happy that we also have some lectures here. Thank you, Bapak and Ibu, for being here with us, and also for students. Thank you for joining the lecture. And since this is a lecture, part of the lecture, of course, there is some task that you have to write the summary of this lecture and put it in the LMS system. So that's your task, yeah, students. And anyway, there is a presence here. There's a presence that you have also to fill out. And for those coming from out from our university, there is a certificate of your presence also. Kindly fill out this one. Okay, maybe you can copy it first before we close this meeting. Anything else? I think we are quite good in time because it's now 5:45. And what time is it now in Kenya, Dahmar?
1:45.
Okay, yeah, it's still in the noon, I think.
So I'm gonna have lunch, and you're gonna break your fast.
Oh, that's perfect. That's so perfect. Okay, so I think that's all for today, and thank you again for everyone for being here and joining us in our lecture. It's really nice to see you again, Dahmar, virtually. We've been like a year or not a year, yeah, a year ago that we met, and
Yeah.
time flies. I hope you are good luck with the research and writing the paper and finishing your PhD. I'm looking forward to receive your publications. I'm looking forward.
Me too. Me too.
Okay,
You have a
Dahmar.
great time in the Netherlands, and thanks a lot again for the invitation. Thanks for everyone who joined today and for the questions asked.
Maybe,
And I hope to meet you again in the future.
yeah, and shall we take a picture together? Yeah. Yeah, Ibu Irma still joining us, Pak Baihaki, Mas Arifin. Yeah. So Kamita will take a picture. Okay. How many slides do we have? 7 slides. Okay, that's quite a lot. Please, students, turn on your camera before you're going to break your fast. I'm a bit strict on that one now. Okay, shall we start? Okay, please go ahead. We have here.
Okay. Okay, I will take your picture. And please turn off. Turn off. I'm sorry. Turn on your camera. I'm sorry. I'm a bit nervous here. Okay. So I will start with slide 1. Please smile. 1, 2, and 3. And then to slide 2. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, please wait. We have 5 more slides. Slide 3, 1, 2, 3. And then slide 4. Oh, slide 4 is turning off their camera.
It's okay.
It's okay. Then thank you. And yeah, I have taken all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dova. And thank you for everyone. Have a nice day for you, Dahmar, and enjoy the for break the fast for everyone. And I'll see you again for the next class. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Good
Thank
evening.
you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Windy.
Thank you.
Bye. Kedengeran ya?